with us today. It's always a pleasure to continue organizing this webinar series with UACD. And thank you to Riam for being with us. I think the conversation today will be extremely interesting. So let's start immediately by introducing her. Dr. Riam Kanso is the CEO of Conception X, and we will learn more about Conception X very soon. And before that, she was heading student entrepreneurship at the University College London Engineering since 2017. Riam has a PhD in neuroscience from Oxford University and has worked at the interface of academia and industry for the best part of the last 10 years. She has also launched 2 companies, worked in medtech and computational science, and gave courses on entrepreneurship both at UCL and Cambridge. So you can see that she's more than qualified to talk with us and discuss about entrepreneurship, education, and startup development. So let's start immediately with the first question. And so I would ask you, Riam, you created Conception X, which establishes a very new and innovative concept of entrepreneurship education, what you call sometimes venture scientists. Can you please describe Conception X to us and also tell us why you decided to create it? Riam, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me properly?
Yes.
So, yeah. All right. So it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation. Higher education is a subject very close to my heart, and it's a great opportunity to share what we've been doing with you and perhaps, you know, discuss and collaborate after the event. So moving straight into Conception X. Conception X is something new. We are a venture program underpinned by a platform and a network that is designed to help PhD students become what we call venture scientists in deep technology, launch startups based on their PhD thesis, and commercialize very interesting technologies whilst they are still in higher education during their PhD. I'm going to circle back to what we mean by a venture scientist. A venture scientist is our term that we use for a science entrepreneur. We think the word entrepreneur is becoming a bit outdated. It's too general. It has some connotations like a Silicon Valley person who lives under a bridge and builds an app and climbs mountains. We're not targeting those people. We are targeting the inventor, founder types who want to build vaccines, who want to create new energy innovations, and who do it whilst they are still in their university. So in our model, in the Conception X model, the university is the incubator. We're not asking them to, you know, go to sit in a co-working space. They're using their PhD time to commercialize their research. So why is Conception X different than other things that are out there? We don't consider ourselves an incubator or an accelerator. We're one step before that. We're an education transformation piece that kind of sits on top of the university structure and commercializes these theses on the go. We don't require PhDs to take time off their studies to build these innovations because, you know, I think this really changes the risk profile of what they're doing. It's one thing to ask someone to drop from their PhD to try venture, and quite another to actually align to their resources. We take students at a very early stage of their journey. They don't need to have a business plan or, you know, a market or anything like that. That's what we help them do. We think they should stay scientists and engineers. We don't try to transform them into business people, whatever that means. And I think that's really important. And then we don't care about the sector that they come from as long as they, you know, are solving a problem. I can go into the details of the program itself, but we run over 9 months every year from February to November. We take PhDs at any year in their journey because each year has its advantages and disadvantages, and then we continue supporting them. The program itself consists of some core elements. The first is our own entrepreneurship training program that we have developed collaboratively with academics from UCL, Cambridge, Oxford, and elsewhere under a Creative Commons license. And it's designed specifically for scientists and engineers who want to commercialize their research. So We have done away with the classical lean startup methodology and all of that, because simply it doesn't work for some of our students. They are building technologies, so we need to look at technology commercialization. That is a program. The training program is for everyone, and it runs over full-day workshops that the PhDs can attend whilst, you know, they're still doing their research. The second and most critical part of the Conception X program is that we offer one-to-one business and technology coaching every month. So each PhD building a product is assigned one business coach and one technology coach. They see them every month, they see how they're progressing, and they give them tasks. This has been voted consistently the most crucial part of the Conception X journey, and has been voted as the most effective thing in building startups. And I'll give you our metrics in a second. It's very important that the technology coach is a person who has worked on a similar technology before, who can give them the roadmap. And then we also have external mentorship and collaboration with industry partners who can give the PhDs use cases and things to work on. And finally, we have public events. We launched as a pilot in University College London in 2018. And to date, we have supported 100 PhD students who have gone on to raise £7 million. That's, I don't know, 8 million euro perhaps, in early stage VC capital. And those who have not raised funds have been successful at getting grants or have signed industry deals. So why did I, with my board, decide to launch Conception X? And the mission is for three main reasons. The first is that we are dealing with some of the smartest people in the world who are doing PhDs, and they are, you know, for some people the academic route is fine, or working for a corporate, but there should be another option. With the world changing and the face of, you know, the economy changing, we think it's really important to train them for a spectrum of options where they learn the skills of venture, to be self-sovereign, to think about projects, you know, that solve a problem, and to collaborate with others outside the roots of what classical academia and the corporate world offers these people, because there is potential. And we need to take this kind of inventive way outside the existing structures and give it to the students. The second is that the world has some really huge problems right now in health. I'm not even going to mention the COVID world, but, you know, climate is in a bad way, finance, well-being, and we need new and innovative approaches to solve these problems. So we only work on mission-oriented startups and projects as well. And then the final reason is that it's about the educational sector, which is the topic of this program, and what universities need to do to be relevant and to prepare the workforce of the future. And if the universities don't move into the new economy or society, we're missing a huge problem. And the internet came out of the university sector. And now where are all these innovations happening? So it's about reclaiming venture and innovation to the public sector and doing it in a more collaborative, fair, transparent, and safe way, because you don't need to be under any kind of existential or financial threat to invent something new and start a company, because that takes it away from the people who are most able to do it. So I've been focusing on startups in this kind of introduction, but I think, you know, we might move on to that. We don't only train the students to build startups or force them to do so. Not everyone is supposed to become a startup founder. In fact, that's probably a really bad idea. In Conception X, there's a spectrum of options, all in the venture category, and startups is one of them. Other students end up either working with industry or simply becoming upskilled for a new spectrum of options. And this is part of what we believe in. So that was a very long answer to your question, but I think it covers a bunch of things in a short period of time.
Thank you very much, Riam. This was extremely interesting, also because this idea of a service to students, to different students. And I think you said at a certain point, the incubator is not a place, but within the university, but is the entire university. Yeah? And I wanted to ask you about this democratization of entrepreneurship education, which is the point that you made right now. This idea that is an education program from PhD students and is for all students, irrespectively of the type of location of their university, the area. Of course, it is science, but can you tell more about this? What kind of students you engage with, what kind of career you do, you prepare for them if is not as simple as startup. Thank you very much.
No, that's a really good question, and thank you. And I think one thing I forgot to do is to define what we mean by deep technology, because sometimes there's confusion around it. So we define deep technology as a technology based on original research conducted at the university level. So whilst it used to be confounded with deep learning and some AI and stuff like that, now it's beyond that. For us, it could be anything like, vaccines, 3D printing, concrete structures, new innovations in health. I don't know, it doesn't matter, as long as it's based on original research. And going back to Rafaela's question, I think this should be available for everyone. So our criteria for admission into Conception X are quite simple. You need to be a current PhD student enrolled at a university. We started in the UK, but with COVID, everything went virtual. So I don't care where they come from. They need to be working on a thesis that is interesting and commercializable. They can join at any point in their PhD. And the last detail is that their supervisor needs to know that they're doing this, mostly because I don't want to have in 8 months 50 angry supervisors emailing me saying, where did you take my students? Why aren't they writing papers? What shall we do with the world? So that's it. The point is that we have leveraged. It's important that we choose students more like a university. They need to be ambitious, have an interesting background, and wanting to go with us on the journey. We don't even know when we select them whether they're going to be capable of building startups or not. And in many cases, they surprise us or they surprise themselves. So the journey of Conception X is a way for them to find out, what they're supposed to be doing. So when we work with PhD students, there are 3 possible pathways they can get, and we call it internally the Conception X sorting hat, like in Harry Potter, where you get sorted to what you should be doing with your life. So they start with the program, they get trained, they get supported, and then a few months into the program, they either continue on the startup route, which means that they get all of the resources, one-to-one coaching, training, and all of those things. And off they go, and at the end they have demo day, they pitch to investors, and they raise capital, and they're on their next journey. The second ones end up doing industry projects with our partners, and some of them might be startups. So we currently are partners, because we started in the UK, are Barclays and Deloitte. So they are looking at kind of forward-looking problems. So then, there are some PhD students who are really good at building and innovating, but probably not suitable for the 7 to 10 year startup route. And then they start taking on industry challenges, thereby getting exposure, having clients early on, and they could possibly end up on multiple routes, either joining another startup or being hired by the firm or anything else. And then the last category are people who want to stay in the lab, but get upskilled in venture and enterprise skills. And those become upskilled scientists. And what we're starting to see, that they're becoming quite successful at getting innovation grants from UK institutions such as Innovate UK. So everybody benefits, and they're doing it during their PhD. So if it works, you're ending up with a PhD and the startup. And if it doesn't work, you're still doing your PhD. So it's a great opportunity for the students to do so. A question that's always in the air is intellectual property and how we deal with that. We adhere to the intellectual property policy of the university that the student comes from. We think that many times there are intellectual property problems because there is a bit of ambiguity and vagueness about what it is that we're protecting and what should be taken to like a tech transfer office or something like that. At Conception X, we support the student to the point that they have a business case. And then when it comes to kind of commercializing or building a company, it still has to go through their university's tech transfer office. It's just that it's a much simpler answer and the journey once we've gotten them to that point, rather than a vague question to the tech transfer office of, I want to build a medtech, can I do it or not? I think we have many interesting metrics, but the best one I think is that 3 years in and 100 PhD students in, we haven't had any single IP problem. It's all been pretty collaborative and safe from the beginning.
Thank you very much, Riam. Again, extremely interesting, especially the fact that not every student working with you in Conception X is supposed to become a startupper. I mean, entrepreneurship education is much broader than that. Mm-hmm. You referred before to the fact that there are many challenges out there in the world we live in, and I think, as you said, you don't want to mention COVID, but that's one of the many. And these challenges will continue to transform our economies and the way we work. Mm-hmm. So what trends have you observed during the last few months, the last year with Conception X? Can you please tell us more about that?
Yeah, so we started this cohort in a very different world. We started recruiting in January and we started in February. And back then COVID was news of a pandemic somewhere else. No one, it wasn't very present. And then it became a very present reality. And of course, we as a small company started having, we're a not-for-profit, by the way, and we're independent from any university. I forgot to mention that. We started having some questions, mostly in this climate with universities shutting down and economic uncertainties. Do people even want to think about startups? Do people want to build startups? What are we going to do? We were still very much based on the premise that we're based in a university and all of these interactions were happening in real time. So we didn't know exactly what to expect, but what we did do is that within 1 month, we transferred the entire program and all of its operations online, which took a bit of work because we also have a platform that kind of tracks and measures underneath. We have all of these one-to-one things. We had to move the training program to become engaging in an online way and kind of help form teams with the students, do the mentorship. So we did that. And we realized that actually the student engagement increased compared from previous years. The population of PhDs that we are dealing with enjoy and prefer the online model. That is not the case for everyone. I'm speaking only about the ones that we deal with. They much prefer the opportunity to log in from wherever they're working, their offices, their labs, which are open, and do the work that they need to do. So we started with 51 PhDs, PhD teams on the program, and now we have 40 something. I forgot the last number, but the attrition has been very, very low in terms of the people working. And I think from the interviews that we've done with the students, because we interview the students with everything that we do, we've been asking them, why are you still doing Conception X? What's interesting? And there are a number of reasons, everybody has them. But I think with the changes coming, I think a lot of PhD students are uncertain about the career prospects that they have traditionally, and they want to broaden those things. And they see Conception X as a safe place to do those. And then the more interesting thing that quite a few of them have pivoted their kind of use cases and what they're working on to focus on relevant issues of note. So for example, we have a mental health matching platform and they're focusing now on uncertainties related to COVID. We have Oxen, which is kind of a vaccine related platform, and now they're kind of mobilizing to solve this problem. So it's really nice to have that platform and flexibility and visibility outside so that the students can actually solve some really interesting things going on.
Thank you very much, Riam. I saw that there are already many different questions in the chat box.
Mm-hmm.
So I would immediately leave the floor to Maria and Georgia to start the Q&A.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Riam, for this very interesting presentation. So we have a couple of questions on the chat. The first one would be to understand a bit more what is the selection criteria for the program?
Yeah. So
and how do you,
yeah.
sorry, and how do you make sure that there's sufficient diversity?
So our diversity criteria, and I'm glad someone asked this question, are extremely high. Half of our finalists last year were women, and we don't select for gender. And then, you know, the diversity of backgrounds is equally high. I strongly believe that it is not because we kind of select half of them being women, it's because we have created an environment where people feel that they can come and try and not need to have all of those entrepreneur traits, like, you know, leave your job and, you know, live under the bridge to build a startup. It's an education program, therefore it's inclusive, therefore everybody can come and play and, you know, try to build a company. And, you know, they're doing great. Like, I think, you know, the women are excelling, and, you know, we have the racial metrics profiles as well, which are very, very high. When we say elite program, I realize that the word elite comes with a bit of, you know, connotations depending where you come from. But I think for us, it's more like intellectual eliteness. Like, we have decided to bring together the best of the best in terms of like the excellence of the program and the resources that we have, but it is open for everyone. So we do have 10 universities represented in our current cohort. We don't select the universities that get involved. We advertise to all of them. So far, our reach has been limited to the UK, but now, you know, it's beyond that. And our criteria for working with a university is that they have to be willing to kind of advertise the program to their students internally. So I don't advertise to a university before I have a discussion with the head of department or the innovation manager to make sure that, you know, there's no conflict with the existing programs, whether they have a problem with it, whether they don't, etc. And, you know, once we do that, it's about the most talented students who can apply, who have the most interesting backgrounds and technologies to work on. So I don't care where they come from, as long as they're interesting and good. And if their supervisors know, and if their universities don't have a problem.
Thank you, Riam. I think you even answered another question in the chat, so that is great. Mm-hmm. So we're going to continue the questions. I'll pass the floor to my colleague, Georgia.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. Another question from the chat is how is the interaction with the HEI environments, so the higher education institution environments, less connected to innovative practices, so outside of the UK, for example?
So far, I mean, we're a small team and we've started in the UK. Let me just give a few details about so we are independent. We're not related to any university. We are a not-for-profit. We don't take any equity from the startups we help support, and we are entirely free for the students. We have been formed based on the mission, and so far we have been funded by donations and sponsorships from the corporates we work in without them actually putting any claim on the outputs that we have. So we've been quite lucky so far. And like, you know, pushing this forward, it's about finding the right funders. I think government should fund something like this, given that it's public sector innovation, but that's another question, and probably outside COVID fundraising. In terms of working with the higher education institutions, I've worked in the university sector for quite some time, so I know something about the dynamics in there. And I think the key thing is to approach these universities that we work with a collaborative approach, and to say that, you know, what we're doing adds to what they're offering, complements it, rather than competes with the resources that they have available. Our training program is under Creative Commons license, so it's always an open invitation from the universities to come and contribute to our training program and add their own fund and add their own kind of support to it. Now, we're very small and we've grown very fast. So in terms of interactions with the UK, outside the UK, I see that happening from, you know, next cohort onwards. Our hands have been full. We're a team of 6 with 6 coaches and the board sitting on top of us who only kind of observes what we're doing without getting very involved into day-to-day. Our board consists of academics and entrepreneurs from the UK, and it's just about seeing that we're sticking to our mission and doing things properly. In terms of working with other universities from across Europe, I think probably this is a nice platform to start engaging with these universities and see what, you know, research groups you have who would like to get involved in the program, because the aim is to help this grow and then to kind of replenish it with industry mentors and collaborators from across the countries, because this is a network, so it needs to grow like that. So I don't know if this answered the question, but we're open and we're collaborative, and it's just about having everybody work on this together.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'll give it back to Maria for another question.
Thank you. And in terms of perhaps more in terms of metrics, how many students in your program actually become startuppers? Do you have like a follow-up? Have you done already a follow-up assessment on that?
It's pretty high. It's 45%.
45%.
That's 45% conversion rate, and I think that's because of the one-to-one business and technology coaching and the way we've recruited before. As we go, I think that's an unrealistic metric to maintain, especially as we want to make the training program more available in the future. But 45% is a very high conversion rate, and they're all kind of functioning companies. You can see them on Companies House and everything. So I do think that we have created something that works. It's just about having the environmental and social ecosystem to kind of continue their growth, rather than them forming startups and then kind of not having anything to do to grow these startups. So we need follow-on programs. Conception X is stage 1. As you know, they finish, and then when they finish their PhDs and they're building startups, they should be handled and received in a more, you know, either to a follow-on accelerator or, you know, to an economy that sustains them. We're doing the first part, but we cannot do all of the journey, of course.
Okay, thank you. And I just have a follow-up question. Do you work with accelerators?
Not directly. I mean, they have their own business models, their plans, and their own ambitions. But, you know, our teams have been quite successful into getting into other accelerators like Y Combinator and Techstars and everything else. I'm not a very big fan of a lot of these and the way they operate and, you know, how they do fundraising and some of the ethics that they push. But at the end of the day, like, sometimes it offers a good launch pad for our students. Ideally, they should, you know, either, we don't even push them to raise capital. That's not the right solution for everyone. Some of them should just kind of do the classical business thing and just get clients and have more use cases rather than being diluted early on. But yeah, I guess we have yet to see how they fare. But yeah, the short answer is nothing official in terms of collaborations with follow-on programs.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll pass again the floor to my colleague, Georgia.
Yes, another question that is coming in the chat. How do you assure that the optimization of the participants' human capital through their ventures? So how could society and labor markets be losing this human capital available?
I don't think I really understand the question.
So the question coming from the chat is, how do you
oh, it's a question about entrepreneurial dreams that are not fulfilled.
Sorry.
Well, but that's why we do it during the PhD, so that they can have a safe place of examining whether these entrepreneurial dreams do have a landing pad and whether there's a business case behind it, rather than them putting a lot of capital and effort and like probably losing a very tangible educational pathway at the expense of an entrepreneurial dream. So,
if I may, because it's connected to that, what are the obstacles? Is in the chat, standing in the way between a PhD researcher and the venture scientist. So, what are, based on your experience, what is the kind of mindset change you have to operate?
The mindset changes are very, I mean, you know, it's the classical stuff from moving from a mindset of research and perfectionism to kind of creating something that works for a small number of people and working with other people. I think, you know, these are some of the main things we see, kind of getting PhDs to realize that they have to speak to potential clients, think more commercially, and not realize that they can do everything themselves. It's not very different than anywhere else. But like just kind of looking at the more of the obstacles, I think many people ask me if doing a startup stops people from finishing their thesis. Maybe it's our data set, but so far we found that on the contrary, it makes people more productive and they can't wait to finish their thesis and defend it. People are not dropping out of their PhDs. These are people who like to maintain their PhD title. They want to become doctors. They're not all kind of deciding to become business people and become CEOs and, you know, live that dream. And I think, you know, I think it's very important to know that we're not, in Consumption X, we're not saying that everybody doing a PhD should build a company. We are saying that there is a subset of PhDs who have inventor DNA in them, who could probably benefit from learning how to do this by themselves rather than joining the research arm of a large corporate, if that is what they want to do. So, and you know, that's creating economic returns. It's being quite, it's having a lot of returns to the economy, and it's an efficient program to run as well. And if they don't build startups, they're getting the skills they need and they have more hiring choices. And I think we all care about the fact that there are fewer academic jobs, that there are academics, and that we should help train these really smart people not to lose on their sovereign dreams and like become, you know, join jobs that they shouldn't join. They should have the chance to do so, and this is what we're offering them.
Thank you. We have a last question from the chat, and this is very specific. How do you make sure that how do you do the matching between the students and the business and technology coaches? How do you make sure it works?
Our sample sizes have been quite manageable to put a lot of thought into it. As this grows a bit more, we might need, you know, the help and network of people. But I think simply, each PhD has one technology coach and one business coach. The technology coach needs to be someone who has worked on a similar technology in the past, possibly like an exited entrepreneur or someone who has been an advisor for a while or has built this kind of startup with a technology background. And they should be helping the students with their technology roadmap. I'm going to say that these coaches are people we pay quite well, and they're not allowed to take any commercial interest in the companies because this is kind of something quite different. It's a programmatic thing, it's not a business thing. The business coach is someone who has preferably worked in the same industry sector that the student has worked with in the past. So the joint effort of the technology and business coach with kind of supporting these students every month leads to something that has so far for us led to a 45% conversion rate to startups that are receiving investment. So I do think that there's a way to do it. I'm pretty sure that there's no shortage of tools out there and skills matching to have like, you know, a pool of coaches that can be matched. But like in terms of resource, you have to account for 2 hours a month, 9 months a year, 1 hour for the actual coaching session, and 1 hour for the actual notes taking and tracking. And I saw a question, it is free for students. They don't pay for participation in the program.
I take the floor for immediately because I know that there is Denis Gauvreau from the Polytechnique of Montréal with a burning question, and I would ask Denis to ask the question in concisely. Thank you, Denis. The floor is yours.
Concisely, oh my God. Well, first of all, congratulations. This is brilliant. I really like it. I like the semantics of venture scientist. We are here at Polytechnique inventing our own innovation system. It's called 4PM, Powering Platform Partnerships, Polytechnique Montréal. And like you, we feel that the university is the incubator with not only the people, but also the research labs and the infrastructure platforms. I'm a little puzzled, however, and this is a question. I'm not quite sure that I perhaps misinterpreted what you said, but referring to the lean startup We have now 30, well, we've been in operation for 18 months. Everything we have is pre-MVP.
Mhm.
And therefore, we can't apply BMC. We have to really go with the principles of the lean startup. To such an extent, we develop our own methodology questionnaire around, what is the MVP? How can you get there? How much is it going to cost? And who are the early adopters to speak to? I would like you to tell me why you feel and said explicitly that, we're not in a lean startup universe.
I think, okay, I should possibly qualify that. What I want to say is that I should probably look at it the other way. We have quite a number of students who come in with a technology that's looking for a use case rather than a problem that they want to solve with a technology, because it's deep tech. So we find that the step that we need to take before thinking about kind of what's your customer's problem and how you want to solve it is to look more at kind of the technology readiness level of the technology that they want to commercialize. And then afterwards, start thinking about their customer. To give you a more tangible thing, like sometimes I have people coming in building a 4D ultrasound sensor. That is something that needs to look for a problem that it's trying to solve sometimes. So whether, I think the lean startup principles start applying later. What they need to start doing first is to start thinking about this technology, how they can make it commercializable, and having chats with potential mentors and clients and see how they can start doing that. And then we can start taking a step back and using methodologies that already exist. So like the 4D ultrasound sensor is now a medtech application, but that's very much down to the fact that they have spoken to a medtech expert first and not a property expert, because then it could have become something completely different. So I kind of qualify the whole range of business approaches with the lean startup, but my point is when we get people to start looking at the classical tools that exist, whether it's the business model, Canvas, or anything, we find that a lot of these tech first companies start getting lost because they don't know, like they don't necessarily have a customer in mind. So it takes, our training program looks at things a bit more differently. So the first is kind of a mindset change, and then kind of looking at what it means to commercialize technologies, where technologies can sit in the kind of commercialization framework, whether they are, a part of a larger ecosystem of technologies, part of a supply chain, whether it's a disruptive technology, whether it's a marketplace, having them look into that. Then they meet mentors and startups who can give them use cases. And then we start with the traditional business tools that we have for some of them. So that was a long-winded way of saying that we had to create our own sequence of events because a lot of them come with the technology first and not with an idea that they want to solve a problem. So I can send you our kind of training curriculum, which I think could be quite useful because we're working on it collaboratively. But I cannot emphasize how important it is for the training to have a full day session on what it means to do venture, like from a more philosophical perspective, and what it means for their careers.
Will it be possible to follow up with you directly, and can the OECD Raffaele send me your, because I'm very keen on your experience, although we're not only PhD students, we're also professors. And thank you very much. This is very interesting.
No, my pleasure.
There is a very last question before perhaps we start wrapping up. This is about any effect on the participant's dissertation in terms of research questions to be asked, methods, aspiration for publication. Last question before you start closing.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think when we take on, and this has been a question about admission criteria, because we don't want to jeopardize the students' kind of research pathways, the projects that they're working on have to be a direct commercialization of their research thesis. So, that's one of our admissions criteria. And what we have found is that whilst the project has, slightly changed their dissertation at some point, in the most case, it has given them an impactful use case to talk about or a more tangible aspect of the thesis that they're writing. I mean, in an ideal world, I would like these people to go to product as thesis rather than, a bunch of papers as thesis, especially when it works. There have been some interesting cases where we've had people collaborate, because sometimes PhDs meet and they join forces and then their PhD changes slightly. We've had two students, one was a mechanical engineer and one was a biohacker, who collaborated to build an adjustable capsule for gut microbiome monitoring. And they met at the very beginning of their PhD. They had slightly different ideas in mind about what their PhD would be, but with this collaboration, their thesis changed slightly to kind of start incorporating the new work that they're doing. Is this a bad thing? Is this a good thing? It depends very much on, you know, their aim of their career and how their supervisor feels about it. But this is why we ask supervisors to approve their admission from the beginning, so that we don't get accused of stopping the course of research as well. So in the theses have been continued. People are still getting the PhDs. The thesis is probably changing a little bit, but we hope that something interesting comes out of it.
Thank you very much. I think it was beautiful and very active. We have bombarded you with questions from our audience. Thank you very much for being with us. If Julia allows, I would say two things, and then give the floor to her for wrapping up. I really liked this idea of innovation hub, in the sense the university as an innovation powerhouse that is standing there and requires some ideas, efficiency, management capacity to squeeze the citrus. Being at the Center for Entrepreneurship at the OECD, of course, this semantic issue of venture scientist or entrepreneur is something that we might discuss. But in any case, I like very much this issue of options, giving PhDs, students different options about their career, the possibility, the way in which engage with their life, and put them in a sort of supply chain of innovation that starts with Conception X and should be continued with something else. Because what we need desperately at this point is to eliminate any form of entropia from our innovation systems, research systems. We need to be efficient and effective in the way in which science generate innovation, which doesn't mean, of course, reducing liberty, freedom, but on the contrary. So, Riam, it was an honor for me, a great pleasure to host you in this Geography of Higher Education series, and I hope this is the first time that we interact, not the last time. I give the floor to Julia for, so if you want to say something, sorry.
Sorry, I just want to add two very quick things. And obviously this is a collaborative platform. So if you're a university who would like to make Conception X available to your students, we've opened applications now for next year. Our capacity is now a bit higher. Applications start in November. We have some discovery sessions where students can come and ask questions about the program, so I can send you those. And the other thing is that our demo day is on the 4th of November, where the finalists of this year will be presenting. So if you would like to come and see this in action, our demo days look more like a thesis defense rather than a usual pitch thing. Like they talk about what they're doing and then there's a discussion with the audience. We have 10 finalists. It's on the 4th of November. And this year we're doing something slightly different in that we are live streaming it on our social media channels so that everybody can watch the PhD. So if you log into our Twitter account, which is @ConceptionXTech, I think I can send it with Julia's help afterwards, on the 4th of November at 10 a.m. GMT, because we're moving to GMT now again in the UK. You can watch the venture scientists in action. So that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Riam. It was a very interesting discussion. As Raffaele said, witnessed by so many questions. I just want to say very briefly two things before we close, because we were already late. I loved when you said that the PhD students, through your program, they learn how to work in the real world and abandon this world of perfection that you create when you do a PhD. And I talk from personal experience. When I started working after a PhD, very much on quantitative stuff, I was used to my comfort zone of formulas and mathematical equations, and starting to work was a big shock. So I would certainly love to have more, real life experience, that I had to work, on the job rather than before. And then at some point you also mentioned something about, the startup in the ecosystem. Of course, this series of webinars is very much about the role of higher education institutions, but they are not alone. And when you talk about entrepreneurship and startups, the other actors of the ecosystem are absolutely key and have a key role to play, like playing the music together in an orchestra. And I think that it's very important to remember that even when we talk about, the role of higher education institutions.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. Thank you so much again. And I think now we can set our participants free. But thank you so much again for participating in this webinar.